the administrators, the counselors, the custodians, and all the other adults who have sacrificed to make Central such a good school. I thank my family and my friends for their undying support, especially during my struggle to write this speech.
Seriously.
Most of you wouldn't believe how many half-written speeches there are cluttering my computer. God really had to outdo himself to get the message across that I'm really not all that clever. So I should stop trying. You'd be much better off listening to somebody else talk. Therefore, I'm just going to try to convey the words of a much wiser individual. So, my only real job is to convince you that this individual is worth listening to. So let's hope I don't botch up my one job. I want you to consider, each of you, before you go on with your lives as high school graduates, listening to Jesus Christ. Now, I don't mean necessarily listening to him as Lord and Savior, but as teacher. I want each of you to contemplate Jesus as at least a very wise man who may have something meaningful to teach you about how you should live the life set before you. But why should you? Historian Philip Schaff writes, "This Jesus of Nazareth, without money and arms, conquered more millions than Alexander, Caesar, Muhammad, and Napoleon. Without the eloquence of schools, he spoke such words of life as were never spoken before or since, and produced effects which lie beyond the reach of orator or poet. Without writing a single line, he set more pens in motion and furnished more sermons, orations, discussions, learned volumes, works of arts, and songs of praise than the whole army of great men of ancient and modern times." I think, despite the fact that this historian is obviously a Christian, much of what he says rings true. However, if his bias is an insurmountable obstacle for you, consider the words of another historian, H.G. Wells, who was not a Christian. I quote, "I am a historian. I am not a believer, but I must confess as an historian that this penniless preacher from Nazareth is irrevocably the very center of history. Jesus Christ is easily the most dominant figure in all history." End quote. If Jesus has really had the kind of impact that these historians suggest he had, and if he still influences so much of our culture and our thinking, then maybe that's because he had something worthwhile to say while he was here, and still does today. So then, what does this ancient teacher, this Jesus of Nazareth, say? There's an answer to that question that is 4 Gospels long, but I'm going to give you the answer that's 4 words long. Deny yourself and follow me. This sums up the teaching of Jesus. Jesus says, "Whoever wants to be my disciple must deny themselves and take up their cross and follow me." The call to come and die is at the heart of the teaching of Jesus. But what does it look like lived out? The clearest picture of this teaching is Jesus' very own life. Jesus constantly lived to serve other people, not himself. He was more concerned with the dignity of the marginalized than with his own social status. He was more concerned with justice for the oppressed than with his own benefit. He was more concerned with blessing those who abused him than with avenging himself. That's what it means to be dead to yourself. To be so caught up in God and in others that you're willing to sacrifice, you're joyful to sacrifice at great personal cost to yourself if it will benefit them. And for Jesus, the culmination of this was his voluntary death on a literal cross in order to save all of us from death. This is the teaching of the man who has stood at the forefront of history for 2,000 years. Maybe you don't buy the God part or the sacrificial death part. That's okay. We live in a country where it's my freedom to talk about it. And it's your freedom to talk about it. But you know what? It's changed millions of lives, including my own. And even if you disagree with the God part of it, all of us can still learn from Jesus' teaching about self-sacrifice. What would our world look like if just the nearly 600 graduates of CHS loved and served selflessly like Jesus did? How would our world change? Finally, regardless of what you believe and what you plan on doing for the rest of your life, I want to offer all of you a closing word of blessing, because I don't think there are any prerequisite beliefs or conditions for receiving a blessing. This blessing is for everyone here, but it is especially for all of my fellow students, whom I've come to know and love so well. I hope that this blessing will move you to lead a life of blessing others.